Today I'm starting a new series of compositions based on chess. Chess is a game I've always loved. I love the intricacies and the strategies behind it, and what I thought I would do is write a theme that represents each one of the different chess pieces. And today I'll start with the king. So I've got my sketching template up, and let's just jump right in and get started. The sketching template I'm using is very simple. It's just a piano to hold the chords and a staff for melody. At this point, I'm just focusing on writing the music. The orchestration will come later once the entire sketch is completed. Another important step is to know as much about the piece as you can before you begin. Even if the title is a placeholder, it can help keep you on track in the writing process. So you can see in the subtitle, I put the words a stately procession. Stately meaning dignified, and a procession, that kind of slow walk you might see a king do in a grand cathedral. It's interesting that just this information that we've already put in gives me some idea of what the tempo should be. So I got up and I paced back and forth, trying to remember kind of that processional walk that you do when you get your diploma in high school and they're playing Pomp and Circumstance, that kind of tempo. And I found a tempo that works well for me. So let's go ahead and put that in now. I found that my kingly procession was about quarter note, I'd say equals 96. Seemed pretty good for me. And I'm going to add in the word stately to the tempo marking. Now that I've entered all of this information, I've got a pretty good idea about what the piece is going to sound like. So I'm going to start focusing on the first 8 bars. I also know that this piece is going to be a very simple form of ABA. So I'm going to work on the melody for that first 8 bars. I'm not going to worry about harmony or chords. I'm going to focus all my attention on the melody. So how do I start? Well, for me, I like to use my voice. I like to sing. I like to imagine myself in the situation, seeing this king in a large cathedral, walking in this processional. Or, truth be told, I'll probably stand up and walk around and try to feel that feeling. And as silly and foolish as that might look, that's a really good way to immerse yourself in these feelings, to be able to write, to be able to come up with these melodies. So don't be afraid to do that. I'm going to go ahead and work on this, and we'll come back and take a look at it. I've completed the first 8 bars of the melody, so let's take a listen to it, and then we'll go back and break it down. You can see it's a very simple diatonic melody, very singable, and that's going to work to our advantage as we work with this phrase. So let's take a look at the first component of this melody, which is its rhythm. Starting in bar 1, I'm using the rhythm of a dotted quarter note followed by an eighth note, a quarter note, and 2 eighth notes. So the rhythm is... And you'll notice that I've used that exact rhythm in bar 2, bar 3, and bar 5. Even though the rhythm is the same, the notes are changing. So in the first bar, it's G, C, C. In the second bar, it's F, E, E. In the third bar, it's G, D, D. And in the fifth bar, it's E, B, B. So even though the pitches are changing, the rhythm remains a constant, and it's helping to glue this phrase together. If we were to break this phrase up into 2 4-bar sections, you'd notice that in the 4th bar of each section, there's a longer note, this 3 beats of a D and this 4 beats of a G. That's to give a little bit of room, a little bit of breath, so that when we do orchestrate this, there's room for things like counter melodies and counter lines in the rest of the orchestra to add interest. Finally, in the 7th measure, there's a figure that's reminiscent of a fanfare. This will become a very useful cell as I develop the melody. I'm sure I'll use it again and again, and possibly even if I write an intro for this piece, I'd use it in the intro. So as I was developing this melody and singing it, was I consciously thinking about all of these structural things we just went over, like the repetition of rhythms or leaving room at the end of each 4-bar phrase? No, this is something we can all do. We can all sing an 8-bar melody. We've heard enough music in our lives that it's become an innate ability that we all have. But there is a power in understanding how to analyze this and go back and look at your melodies and then determine how strong they are, where you can make changes, what you can do with that melody. The fanfare idea is something that I did have. It was something that was important to add that little bar in there, and I knew that I wanted to do that before I started. Other than that, the rest of it just came as I, immersed myself in the idea of this stately processional. So let's move on and look at how I might harmonize this. Since this melody can most easily and obviously be heard in the key of C major, I'll use diatonic chords from the C major scale to harmonize it. Starting in the first measure, we have a collection of notes with a G, some C's, and a D. Our 1 chord, the most obvious choice, works with that collection of notes. Both the G and the C's are in that chord. So using just the triad, the C major triad, it would sound like this. The only note not in the C major triad is the D, which is an available tension. You can consider it an add 2 or the 9. In the next measure, we start with an F, and if we want that F to be a chord tone of one of the triads that we pick, then we have some options. The first option is the D minor chord. So this F would be the minor third of that chord. We could also choose the F major chord, where the F would be the root of the chord. We could choose the G7 chord, where the F would be the flat 7 of that chord. And finally, we could choose the B minor 7 flat 5 chord, with the F being the lowered 5th. The chord I'll choose is the one I think works best here, which is the F major triad, or the 4 chord. So now our progression is from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. And if we look in the next 2 beats, it looks like it's going back to the 1 chord with this E note. So let's enter those chords into the piano part and see what this sounds like. To have a harmonic rhythm of 2 chords per measure, I'm going to repeat this C major triad in first inversion. Now our F major triad. And though I'm not very concerned about voice leading at this point, I'll enter this C major triad in second inversion with G in the bass. I'll put the chords up above so that we can see them, and we'll take a listen to this very simple 1-4-1 chord progression with our melody. I'm going to continue adding in the rest of the chords to this 8-bar phrase using this same method of looking for diatonic chords that work with our melody, and we'll come back and take a look at it. Let's listen to how I harmonized the melody in the first 8 bars using those simple diatonic chords and the method we were using. There are a few outliers in here, and we'll talk about those, but let's have a listen first. The first thing you might notice is this D7 sus4 chord. Now that wasn't part of our list of diatonic chords, but all of the notes in that chord are part of the C major scale. D, G, A, and C. And that would be considered a secondary dominant leading to our G chord, or it could be called 5-7 sus4 of 5, meaning that it has a dominant function leading to our 5 chord. The next chord that's not part of our diatonic chord list is this E dominant 7 chord. Now, it is also considered a secondary dominant of this A minor chord, so it would be 5-7 of 6. And though it's not a diatonic chord because of the G sharp, it is a very commonly used chord to lead to the minor 6 chord. And we see it here one more time with the same function, even though it's a triad, leading to the minor 6 chord. Let's listen to this diatonic harmonization of the melody one more time, and take note how that E7 secondary dominant and the E add a breath of fresh air and lift to the progression. I'm going to take some time now to finish the piece. I'll finish the B section and then the final A, and then we'll look at it and see if there's anything that I've done differently than use these diatonic chords and secondary dominants. I have finished the piano sketch for The King, A Stately Procession, and I think I've managed to stay in the spirit of the piece. Let's go ahead and listen to it, and then we can talk about how I handled the B section and the final A. I'm very happy with how that turned out. I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting things I'll be able to do with the orchestration, especially since the framework of the piece is so solid. So let's look at the B section and see what technique I use to come up with these chords. You'll notice that almost all of the chords in this B section don't come from our list of C major diatonic chords, except for the C chord and the G chord. So where do they come from? Here I use modal interchange to borrow chords from a parallel mode. In this case, I'll use a parallel minor mode. Since our piece is in C major, the parallel minor would be C natural minor or C aeolian. The C root note remains the same, we just changed the flavor of the scale from major to minor. So now in our B section, when we move to the 4 chord, it's not an F major 7, but instead an F minor 7 borrowed from our parallel minor chords. You can see this D minor 7 flat 5 is also from our borrowed chords. The G minor 7 is from our borrowed chords. The E flat, the A flat, the B flat, all of those are from our borrowed chords. Then in the 4th bar we return to the C major triad, which feels like home to me. It feels like the 1 chord. It doesn't feel like a secondary dominant, especially since it's a triad without the 7th. Later on, where it does have the flat 7th degree in the chord, the C7, that does feel like a secondary dominant to me. but this C chord feels like the 1 chord. Let's listen to the first 4 measures of this B section and notice how that C major triad feels like a bright and uplifting return to home. For the melody in the B section, we're using a lot of the same shapes and rhythms that we use in the A section. We're also mirroring this fanfare here in the B section. As we're using all chord tones in the A section fanfare, here in the B section, we're using some more interesting tensions with this sharp 11 and this major 7. Finally, we come to our G major chord, which is one of our diatonic chords from our C major collection of chords. You could also consider that this G major chord comes from C harmonic minor. Either way, it leads us back to the C major triad for our final A section. The chords in this final A section are a combination of our diatonic chords, of our borrowed chords, and of our secondary dominants. One thing to notice is this descending bass line C, B flat, A, G, F, E flat, D. That was able to be achieved because we are mixing in these borrowed chords to reharmonize this final A and give it a fresh sound. As far as the melody, it's an exact copy of the first A melody until we get to bar 22. Whereas in the first A the melody went down, here it reaches upward to help build to a big finish. Let's listen back one more time now that we've broken this piece down and all the ideas and techniques that went into making it. But more importantly, let's listen and see if we can imagine our king walking in a stately procession. Next time we get together, we'll look at orchestrating this piece. And I think it'll be interesting to go from a piano sketch to a full-blown orchestration. So I hope that you'll take some of these ideas and techniques and use them for your own piece. Thanks for coming along, and I'll see everybody next time.